welcome you if you are new. And if you are not new, you've joined us before, but you are new to this particular affinity group, type first in the chat so that we know this is your first time joining us. But in either case, we're glad to have you here joining us in one of our affinity group meetings. This is just one of the many ways that we serve our Inforum members and that you can network with other members and fellowship with us. We also have learning and development programs, leadership programs, and we have industry groups, 5 industry groups to be exact. Healthcare, manufacturing, technology, and some other ones that you can find out if you go to our website. So what I'm going to do now is drop the website in the chat, and you can click on that link and see not only the different opportunities to engage, but what the upcoming events are. The upcoming event that I want to make sure that you know about if you're not registered for is happening this evening, and it is a members only event. So if you are a member and you're not registered, please sign up to join us. Dr. Treva Lindsay from The Ohio State University will be talking about women's suffrage, the women's suffrage movement, and I have the pleasure of being able to moderate that discussion. So we hope you join us there. And then we have a DEI conversation that's going to be happening tomorrow. It's a virtual workshop. Lastly, we have a event with one of those industry groups I mentioned, Technology Next, on Thursday. So those are just some of the few events we have for the rest of this month, and our big event, the capstone, will be happening in November. So hopefully you will join us for some of those events, sign up for some of the training programs or one-offs, and we would love to have the opportunity to talk to you about membership if you're not a member. So I'll drop my LinkedIn connect in the chat, and I would ask that everyone else do the same to connect. Thank you. Back to you, Leslie.
Go
ahead, Carla.
I was going to give it back to you, Leslie, but also didn't mention that Carrie's going to be taking a poll. So look for the screen, and there's going to be a question, and we're going to ask everyone to answer it. You can answer it. It'll actually answer it right on the poll during the meeting, and then we'll give you the results afterwards. And I think with that, we're going to be a reminder that to put questions in the chat also, and we'll answer those when we're done hearing from our speaker, who is Amanda Bright McClanahan, and she is the Chief Operating Officer for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and responsible for overseeing all operations, including administrative and programmatic services. And prior to joining the MEDC, she served as the Budget Director for the Michigan Department of Human Services. And she began her career in state government at the Michigan State Budget Office, supporting the development and monitoring of Michigan Medicaid Department of Human Services budgets. And she's a graduate of the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy with a master's degree in public policy. And she received a dual Bachelor of Arts degree from Valparaiso University in political science and French. And she graduated summa cum laude as a Christ College Honors Scholar. So Amanda, welcome, and we are so glad to have you here today.
Oh, I am so excited to be with all of you today. Thank you so much for the invitation. Before I start my formal remarks, I've come up through the ranks of state government over the last 17 years, and the ability to connect with women leaders today in ways that were not available to me 17 years ago, and certainly not to my colleagues, has just been so heartening. So I truly appreciate those opportunities. And I myself am always available for anybody that's cruising through and wants to talk about anything related to economic development. And I try to really kind of pay that forward with mentorship. And so that's something I always mention to groups, anytime that you can drive mentorship of women leaders, letting women know that they're not alone and that the issues that do confront us are still alive and well, I think is a critical part of that development. So I'm actually going to talk a little bit about that today. I think what the topic I was asked to talk about today was really around sort of the economic outlook over the next several months and where we've been and where we're headed, and where the MEDC is trying to help assist entrepreneurs and really overall economic participation. So we'll do some highlights, talk a little bit about that, and then I would love to open the floor for any and all questions you may have. And those that I can't answer, I will circle back around with Carla and Leslie to make sure the answers get back out to all of you. I think really excited to hear about your event this evening. I was going to talk a little bit about suffrage. The 100-year anniversary of the right to vote is such a significant milestone, and it seems like such a long period of time has passed, except when you take a look, especially this year, and you're looking at how far women have come, but you're reminded that as we look at our own leadership, as we look at our roles as entrepreneurs, as we look at our economic participation, the equity that we have has been so hard fought, and we have so much further to go. And that, to me, is a call for action. And would like to really talk to you about some of the things that we're doing. Just to set a framework for you, women across the country right now are breaking records in representation in the workforce and in leadership, making up actually 10% of the CEOs in Michigan's venture-backed startups and 7.2% of those heading up Fortune 500 companies nationally. But even those percentages, as exciting as they are, I think just underscore how much further we have to go before we achieve true parity for half of our total population. Here in Michigan, there's been a few things going on as we start to try to work towards a coordinated collaborative strategy for parity and economic participation. This summer, many of you may be aware, Governor Gretchen Whitmer announced that the Michigan Women's Commission would actually be transitioning to the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. And that's actually part of the same group of agencies that the MEDC helps to support. And that is really a demonstration of a focus now on full participation for women in the workforce and really moving towards the concept of financial freedom. I think that was a rallying cry as part of the ratification for the right to vote 100 years ago. And it still is a space where women have not found that type of independence. And that's something that the MEDC is so excited to be a part of. I think that we have to acknowledge a few things about the past few months. The steps that were taken to protect the health and welfare of the state by Governor Whitmer were absolutely necessary. We went from being the third highest state in the nation in terms of COVID cases to 33rd very quickly. We were able to actually flatten the curve overall in terms of infections, all the way up until actually 2 weekends ago when the governor's executive orders powers were overturned by the Supreme Court. We actually saw a general flattening of that curve. The numbers to date are now increasing again. It's very clear that our state's effective response helped save thousands of lives and positioned us to look toward recovery. But we do need to remember more than ever now that the way that we protect our economy, the way that we protect our entrepreneurs is to mask up, socially distance, wash our hands frequently, continue to do the things that we need to do to keep the curve as flat as possible. We know that the best way to support a strong economy in Michigan right now is actually to support those critical public health measures. But in the midst of all of that, we cannot deny that small businesses and workers in Michigan have been impacted in so many ways by the pandemic and by the necessary actions we had to take to halt the explosion in cases earlier in the summer. Just as a frame of reference for everyone, just kind of give you a sense, small businesses in Michigan are roughly about 170,000 of them that have 500 or fewer employees. Between January of 2020 and the end of September, small businesses in Michigan lost on average of 18% of their revenue, according to research from Harvard and Brown University. In that same space, there are certain industry sectors that were incredibly impacted, specifically in the hospitality areas and in tourism, right around 42% loss in revenue during that period of time. That's going to become pretty important in just a minute as I talk about labor participation. But what we have seen over the last several months has been an unprecedented challenge to Michigan small businesses. Excuse me, Michigan small businesses. And that impact has been even more detrimental for women, both as business owners and as participants in the workforce. We know that as small businesses have experienced significant liquidity issues, that women and minority-owned businesses have faced disproportionate challenges in accessing capital to both continue operations, to avoid laying off their employees, to do simple things like paying their rent. And that those challenges are from being able to access fair rates, being able to get the types of terms that have been generally available to small businesses, being able to even get an appointment to be able to talk to somebody about accessing that capital. And that's something that we need to keep in mind moving over into the next several quarters of recovery. In addition, based on reporting that Crain's Detroit Business did in September, by July of this year, women 20 years and older in Michigan faced an unemployment rate of 17%. That was up from 2.8% in February, while men in the same cohort had a lower unemployment rate of 15.7%. When the economy began to slow down in March as a result of what we needed to do to respond to the growing outbreak, women accounted for 57% of the job cuts in the hospitality and leisure industry. Again, tie that back to the very large loss of revenue that was experienced in that industry and the direct tie to women's participation in the workforce. And they also comprised 82% of the losses in education and health services workforce by April. The impact of COVID on women of color has been even more debilitating as Asian, Hispanic, and Black women are facing even higher rates of unemployment than white women. And I think I mentioned at the beginning of the hour that, I think we're challenged by some of the things that have challenged women in the workforce even more so now. We're tackling virtual or hybrid schooling environments, and we're reminded of how still women continue to own the lion's share of the chores of child rearing, of child care, responsibilities at home, forcing us to look at better policies as employers, as consumers, as individuals who are active in policymaking about what we can do to support women, knowing the tremendous value and impact that women bring to their workplaces, but also recognizing that to balance it all, what we have in place was not built for the type of economy that we're transitioning to now. Through a number of actions, I think over the past month, you've seen that Governor Whitmer is sort of setting a tone. And that began with 49,000 state employees now being eligible for 12 weeks of paid parental leave immediately following the birth or adoption of a child. I think the demonstration of that by one of Michigan's largest employers, and that is the state, really will lead the charge for more employers to recognize that that type of policy really levels the playing field for women in the labor force. Specifically at the MEDC, though, I think our focus is really being driven towards a lens of equity in a number of ways. And that is really through a reorientation of our strategic plan and our goals over the last 20 months. Well before COVID, the MEDC started working trying to understand the disproportionate recovery from the last recession of different parts of the state, of different parts of the population, trying to understand why income mobility, why issues of geographic equity in recovery, educational attainment, and others were not, why the disparities were so large, and really what role could economic development play in addressing those disparities. And as we were taking a look at all of the data, the research that we were bringing forward, what we quickly discovered is that there were a number of things that economic developers and those that were invested in community development can do to help begin to address that equity. And for the MEDC, that's really starting in 3 different areas. And I'm going to talk about those kind of at a high level. The first is really understanding how we use economic development tools to effectively support those that cannot access the supports through technical assistance, through capital access, through incentives to start, to grow, to expand, to retain their businesses. And as part of that, we are really working to reorient how we use that toolbox, being as deliberate as possible in supporting more women-owned businesses like Dakota Integrated Systems in Detroit, which we've done a number of different incentives with in the past, but we've actually reoriented to supporting actually leadership training and job training support so that the types of equity and the types of economic growth and opportunity we want to see for women is more universally available. We've also partnered recently with Michigan Women Forward, where we created a $1.5 million Michigan Entrepreneur Resilience Fund. And that's provided already more than $500,000 in support to 94 small businesses across the state, with more than 82% going towards those owned by women, minorities, and veterans. Businesses like Brown Construction Collective Plus in Pontiac and Lions and Rabbits in Grand Rapids have accessed these tools and support that they need to survive and succeed beyond this crisis. So it becomes a matter of understanding whether we have the complete set of tools that we need as economic developers and whether we have them oriented in a way that allows us to really look at issues of equity. So I would say that kind of is in the range of how we begin to look at recovery. Through the restart process over the last month, we have seen a number of successes, but most recently we've allocated over $100 million in federal funding to support the Small Business Restart Program. And we were required to allocate at least 30% of those funds to businesses that were women, minority, or veteran owned. We believe that every region in the state is actually going to exceed that mark, with Detroit awarding more than 70% of its grants to minority-owned businesses. And I think that makes a huge difference when we're being intentional about that process. In terms of relief, and how we begin to really look at the next several months. I think we need to understand both as economic developers, as entrepreneurs, as leaders, that we came through the first wave of this crisis and we were able to bring to bear a phenomenal number of tools. We had revenue from the federal government. We, at the MEDC alone, stood up 19 separate programs in 7 months to really support capital access, technical assistance, liquidity, and others issues, other needs. We did that and now are facing a situation where cases are going up again. And we know that with that bolus, we have a new obstacle that's going to be confronting us. And I think that's where the next 2 pillars of our strategic plan need to be really emphasized, and the partnerships that we developed really used. The first is understanding what's happening in the environment around us in as real time as possible. We know that we've staved off some of the large impact to small business by pushing so much liquidity into the marketplace. But what we know now is that the set of tools that small businesses need have shifted. It's not just liquidity now. We need to teach small business owners more about e-commerce. We have to help them set up marketing and inventory platforms to be able to get their products out. We need to work with businesses that were unable to take advantage of the summer and their normal seasons to build up the revenues that they needed in order to head into the winter months to provide those inventory purchases, getting ready for the next summer season. We need to really be thinking about the life cycles of businesses. We know that you start a business, it grows, and for many, that growth trajectory continues and you're able to pass that on. For some, though, it means exiting a business. And how do we do that effectively? And how do we do that in such a way that we are not impacting the overall community and we're supporting that in an equitable way? To that end, we have been working with a number of partners, and those include the Michigan Small Business Development Center throughout the state in really standing up trainings and technical assistance supports and really services that will help business owners go all the way through that life cycle in a way that ensures that each individual business has the tools that they need. I think it's really important as we're looking at women entrepreneurs that we're taking a look at that lens through the types of additional trainings and additional tools that can be brought to bear and the relationship building, which brings me to the third pillar, which is really capital access. I believe strongly that there needs to be an equalization of the access to capital for entrepreneurs. We know from all of the data that's out there that women and minority-owned businesses have a harder time accessing capital throughout the life cycle of their businesses. I think in particular, what we have found over the last 7 months is that we have been able to partner with organizations whose mission it is to actually go out and extend that access to capital. Metro Community Development in Flint, Northern initiatives actually in Northern Michigan. We've worked with community impact partners and others in Detroit to make sure that we are supporting a network of capital access that extends throughout the state. I think that also includes fostering inclusive and supportive programming throughout with regional partners in very different ways throughout the state to meet those regional needs. So one example that I'm really excited about, and I get to actually go and be with them this evening to actually judge their pitch competition, is the One and All program led by the Lansing Economic Area Partnership, LEAP. We're supporting an initiative there where they're providing access to a professional business network, seed investment funds, and more to create a pathway for women-owned startups and small businesses to prosper in Michigan. We're actually tailoring the outreach, tailoring the tools, tailoring the networking to women in order to allow them to be successful. And in a similar way, we are opening up support through our startups programs, through small businesses globally in our international trade programs, and through our own capital access programs to continue to build on that foundation. I didn't have it written down today, but I do want to mention one thing that I think is an equity issue that we need to spend more time talking about, and that's access to broadband. This is an issue that's pretty near and dear to my heart. I grew up in a very rural area of the Thumb. I am 41 years old, and there was still a party line when I was a kid, a party telephone line in the Thumb. So the technology deficits between me as a child there and my cousins who were located in Genesee County at that time was significant. And to think that that deficit has been eclipsed over time is not accurate. Michigan has very uneven access to broadband, and that impacts education. It impacts your ability to effectively do business, to access health services. It impacts your ability simply to talk to people, especially in the current environment. And that access is not just infrastructure. It's how do we ensure affordability for individuals and families to be able to have those critical services. So about a week ago, Governor Whitmer announced a task force. It's the Connected Michigan Task Force, intended to find a way finally to guarantee accessible broadband to all communities across the state. The MEDC is actually convening that group, and we're supporting that group because it is an issue of equity. It is an issue of income mobility. It is an issue of profound obstacles to community development and to business expansion in the state. And beyond all of that, it is absolutely a hindrance without that access to any individual achieving their full economic potential, because so much of the training and schooling that needs to be done now around careers is in the virtual environment. So that is a critical aspect that I think as networks continue to build out and as you continue to talk about issues, so many things that I take for granted in East Lansing, Michigan, are such big obstacles in other areas of the state that we really need to conquer. So all said and done, I could talk about this stuff for hours. In the last century, we have made profound progress towards creating equitable opportunities from the boardroom to the factory floor. And there is still so much work to be done. And I think that the MEDC looks to partner with organizations like this one to make sure that we're a part of the forward momentum and that we are a part of ensuring that that equal opportunity to economic participation is available to women and minorities. Thank you so much for having me. I'm just so excited and I can't wait to hear the questions that you may have. And let me know if there's anything that you'd like me to cover that I may have missed. Thank you.
Amanda, thank you
so much, Amanda. That was great.
Really excellent information and appreciate your willingness to share with us. So a couple of questions at this point, and if others have them, type them in the chat. How can we address the supply chain issues and highlight where jobs are forming in areas that now need to step up their non-contact businesses?
So I think that's a really good question. I think that there are a few things. I guess I'll kind of take supply chain issues right now. I think we're going to be confronted with some policy decisions that we need to make. I think we're going to need to make them in different ways at the state level, at the federal level, and I think business owners are going to make them about the idea of how do we really approach these new opportunities around supply chain. So there's challenges, but we also, with the opportunities now for reshoring and onshoring, I think Michigan is uniquely positioned to really take advantage, particularly of bringing some of our high growth industry supply chains back home. The flip side of that, though, is in particular for small businesses, supply chain issues present a unique challenge. I think that as we continue to see closed borders from Canada, I think as we continue to see production trying to catch up from months of being shut down, I think small businesses are going to be facing some very difficult challenges about how to really rationalize their business models to allow them to continue to at least kind of hang on through this space before they can ramp back up again. I think that there are so many partners in Michigan that can help with that. I'm asking, I tell every group, small business development centers, go talk to them, spend time with them. They will get you to the right place to be able to do that planning. I think in places where we are seeing job opportunities form around these areas, I think you're going to see the MEDC partnering with local partners to start putting a spotlight on those areas. I think that we started some of that with the incredibly quick transition for some of our manufacturers to manufacturing PPE within 2 weeks of being able to transition your whole assembly line to that. Was pretty phenomenal. I think those partnerships are going to develop very quickly, and I think you're going to see them popping up around adjacent industries to their existing footprint. Med devices, it's where I think we're going to see a lot of opportunities begin to open up.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. So the next question is, how can we highlight where opportunity is growing to give people hope for being employed again across the spectrum of jobs?
I think that's a really great question. I think that's a space where the state can definitely be a leader, but that we really need to work with our local regional networks, whether it's the Michigan Workforce Agencies or other economic development partners. I think we also need to really utilize our community college networks. Because that's where we're able to really align, in a lot of ways, skill sets with employer demand. And so many of our community colleges are so good at working with their local employers to make sure that they are producing graduates or producing retraining opportunities that align with those. That's really a space that I think we've got some more work to do. But with the governor's 60 by 30 initiative, 60% of the working population having transferable credentials by 2030, I think you're going to see a great big spotlight on that very soon.
So it's known that Governor Whitmer likes the idea of the film incentive coming back to Michigan. What are the chances of that getting funded sometime soon?
Oh, wow. That's a hard one. That one I think has a couple of hurdles. First, I think that there's a lot of research, there's a lot of data out on the effectiveness of film incentives and just how large the investment has to be in order for it to be an effective economic driver. So the scale that the state of Georgia or country of New Zealand funds their film incentives compared to what the state of Michigan did, they're just not even on the same page. So I think that's something that we kind of have to own. When we were kind of putting our feet into it underneath Governor Granholm's leadership, it was just, we didn't know a whole lot, and now we do. I think so that's one space. The second is anything that puts pressure on the general fund, general purpose budget right now is a very difficult proposition. And that's for a couple of reasons. One, we have some pretty significant infrastructure needs, not just roads, not just water. We just K-12 schooling, really kind of catching up from all of the kind of digging out we did from the prior recession, and now we need to put ourselves into a growth trajectory. And I think issues like childcare access, which is going to require an investment from the state, are also putting some pressure on that. So that's, I think anything that kind of has to go into that universe and compete with those priorities is difficult to argue. And that's something that we're finding with a lot of our economic development toolbox, candidly. So what are the chances? Yeah, it's an uphill one, I think.
Well, thanks, Amanda. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. Somebody has a recommendation about Schoolcraft College and a very small or a helpful small business development center. And I believe everyone knows how to save the chat, but if you don't, There's 3 dots next to the file symbol, and if you click there, you should be able to drop it right in your computer, so you can save the comments and questions and connections from today. And I know that Carla intends to put us in some breakout rooms, so.
Amanda, though, before you go, I do have, so why is it that women and minority businesses have been hit the hardest? And what was it about COVID that made it so obvious?
So I think, so there's some research, there's a lot of research coming out, right? We have economists, we have public health folks, we have thought leaders all saying different things. So I'll try to synthesize it into what I think it really boils down to. First of all, COVID disproportionately impacted people of color. It hit those populations hardest. So by hitting those populations harder and really even before any of the shutdown orders or emergency needs, those business owners were already more heavily impacted. So that's one space. Secondly, women-owned and minority-owned businesses all have disproportionately carried a higher risk level. They are more likely to use their payday loans or credit cards to support business operations, again, because of difficulty in accessing capital. They are more likely to have terms that candidly are not easily forgiven, which forced them very quickly as they lost revenue into a situation of just outright emergency from a financial perspective. I think that the other space is really around, for women particularly, we see as the restart is happening, we're seeing some struggles with getting women participation in the labor force back up to pre-COVID levels. It's just a fact of life right now that kids are home and those social pressures are hitting. So I think there's a number of factors. I think overall, though, what COVID did is it took kind of this universe of factors that we know were active in limiting some of this participation, and it threw them in a crucible and created just the perfect set of obstacles that have just really driven these disproportionate impacts. And we're gonna have a lot of work to do to undo that. So.
Next question, is there any type of plan moving forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are, so the governor has been leading a post-COVID economic recovery work group. That group continues to meet. That group contains thought leaders from around the state. The MEDC's own strategic plan was actually crafted for pretty much a recession scenario. We didn't think it would look like this. And granted, nobody could have done that, but predicted that. But I think that we've got the Brookings Institution working with us. And we've got some other outside research coming in to try and help us target that. But that plan is going to have to evolve. I think what we thought we were going to be doing during this relief period was a slow startup. And now we're seeing those cases coming up again. So I think you're going to have to see, we're going to have to see how we react to that economically, and then what we do to that moving forward. I think you're going to see that plan rolling out over the next several months. But like every other part of the COVID pandemic, it's going to be highly adaptable. It's going to have to be.
Amanda, there was one question on the comment you made about the task force for connectivity and broadband. Is the focus on being connected looking at the high costs that we are paying in Michigan for internet?
Yeah, it's actually, you can't look at broadband without looking at that. So I think we have to acknowledge that bill coming in in the ability to pay it is absolutely an obstacle to access to broadband. I think you're seeing some of that just kind of being acknowledged by some of the work that the internet service providers have done over the last several months and standing up programs like Lifeline. I think that's AT&T's to just try and mitigate those costs. But the reality is that you can give a short-term relief, but that's not going to help the longer-term issue, and we have to confront the longer-term issue. So that will absolutely be part of those discussions, and really looking at broadband pretty much the same way we kind of look at gas or heat or electricity. It's a necessary utility now. And so we got to think about what that looks like. And we're not alone. I mean, the governor obviously announced the task force, but the House and Senate across both sides of the aisle, this is a high priority issue for them. And it really is around the cost to consumers. It's a great question.
Thank you so much, Amanda. You were extremely informative.
Thank you.
You had fun. We really appreciate you